Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, December 17th, 2025, and welcome to the 340th episode of the Midweek Roundup. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our questions that we ask here on on Wednesday afternoon from our newsletter that appears Monday morning via either email or direct on LinkedIn via notifications. Between those two uh, versions, we now have, I'm proud to say, over 2,800 international educators that are getting the newsletter in their inboxes or in their notifications on LinkedIn every Monday morning. So thanks all for being a part of that conversation and international edification by taking in the newsletter each week. So it's our pleasure each week. What we do with the newsletter is we cover a wide range of topics. It's called the SMIE News Fit to Share newsletter, and it has five main topic areas. First off, social media news, which can cover everything from what's happening, how social media is being used in international student recruitment, upcoming webinars, digital guides, AI developments, and how they are being implemented in international education. There's a section on big picture issues that covers a lot of what's happening in the United States in terms of executive orders, new pieces of legislation, other related topics that impact what we do. A solution central section, which focuses on the positives. What are we doing to improve our situation in international education? What innovative actions are we taking? What new programs are we pursuing to try, or new markets we're trying to entertain as we look to grow our international student, or even just maintain our international student populations? And finally, the section that I enjoy most is our global roundup. And that global roundup covers what's happening in international ed circles in other countries. And those are very important because, we sometimes get so bogged down in our daily lives with our jobs. And obviously, lately it's been fairly intense in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of protecting our students and caring for them as they navigate some very uncertain times when it comes to government policy, actions that prohibit travel in a lot of cases, many different things that are impacting who we are and what we do in the United States. And what I'd like to start with today is our first question. And these questions are centered around a lot of the news stories we see earlier in the week in the newsletter. We see some common themes popping up, and then we identify how we want to talk about those here on Wednesday in a more in-depth way. We give you our hot takes on Monday, and Wednesday we kind of assimilate all this information and try and provide a more coherent way to apply some of the things we're talking about and maybe some practical actions that you can take to navigate a very complex field in international education. So let's get right into the first question, and it is this the time to innovate in international admissions? I've just come out of 2 weeks of conferences with AIRC and then the ICEF Miami event. And a lot of the conversations were, oh my gosh, what's happening? What's coming next? And we saw a little bit of what's coming next yesterday with the update to the travel bans, which will be our second question of the day. But there has been, for lack of a better term, a real deluge of negativity. That's about as polite a way as I can put it, coming from this administration over the last 11 months. We're nearing the end of the calendar year. We'll be coming up on a year in office on January 20th, 2026, year of the Trump 2.0. And I am confident in when I say this that our profession has not had a more turbulent, consistently bad set of news and policy decisions and actions taken by the government in 11 years in the international, impacting the international ed industry as we've had since January 20th of 2025. So the question of, is this time to innovate? Some people who might get asked that question that I ran into in the last 2 weeks at some of these conferences, whether it's an agent, whether it's service provider, whether it's colleagues at U.S. institutions, the answer might be, I'm just trying to survive, forget about innovating. But oftentimes, these downtimes give us opportunities to look at what's going on on a grander, on a more global scale, outside our institutions, and how the world is changing, how we must change to survive. And that is part of the challenge here. Just doing what you've been doing and doing damage control on your institution campus, in terms of trying to minimize the impact of some of these government actions, that oftentimes takes up most of your bandwidth. I get it. It's been a long year. And what we have gone through, from the SEVIS terminations to the travel bans to the visa delays for new students for that month we had, the new social media vetting, all the other things that have gone on, the threats to OPT, the threats to duration of status that are still outstanding, that may be coming in the next 2-3 months. We don't know what's next sometimes, and it seems like it's a never-ending negative spiral that we're on. But does that mean you should give up? No. And I think those that are truly resilient, those that see opportunity around the world, not just here in the United States, are thinking about things that need to change, because the way we've been doing things will not produce the same results, because the goalposts have been moved by this administration. We now know we can't recruit in certain markets. We now know, as of January 1st, 2026, key markets are off the table completely. In fact, close to half of the African continent will be off the table for institutions to recruit, including Zimbabwe, including Nigeria, including Senegal, including Gabon, including a variety of other countries that have been regular senders to the United States, particularly Nigeria, a top 20 sender to the U.S. We've just done a quick run of our numbers on campus, and for our current students, we have 44 from Nigeria that are now impacted by the travel ban. Nigeria, and we'll talk about that in the next question. We have already knew about our 20 students from Iran that are on that travel ban list. We have some incoming students from those newly affected countries that we're going to have to accommodate for. So just keeping up with all that and the changes and communications we have to adapt and change, we must stay on top of that just to break even. But now is also the time to innovate, because we don't have a choice. We have to change some of the ways we do things. And what does innovation look like? There's a few articles I'll be posting, one of which is from our colleagues at ISEF Monitor, and it's AI Tools in Action for International Student Recruitment. And this covers a wide range of professionals, some of which I know personally, talking about the tools that they're using, whether it's Perplexity, Comet, that browser of Perplexity, Edu, which is, I gave a shout out last week during the roundup while I was in Miami for ISEF. Edu is a kind of a conglomerate AI platform that helps assimilate all the information that we need to make informed decisions for our industry, and it's increasingly becoming almost potentially a go-to tool for all of us if used properly. It's expensive, but it's worth it potentially if you have the bandwidth to manage it. Talking about AI-powered ETL, extract, transform, load of tools like Zoho Data Prep, to using Expertise AI for translations, for those working in a language school, to AI admission solution from Eunice, to things like ChatGPT-5 as a go-to, and ways that can be adapted and agents that can be created within that. So ISEF Monitor provides a really useful summary of those tools. But on a more practical level, AI tools can certainly improve efficiencies on a lot of different levels. Another tool that I would want to share is from a good friend and colleague, Nicholas Chu, founder of Synorbis. He and I have known each other going on probably 7, 8 years now, and he is just, it was a very simple LinkedIn post, but it really encapsulates a lot of what we're talking about here with the need to innovate. And in terms of what his next approach to this is, hey, it's students' behaviors have changed. We need to keep up. And if we're going to communicate with them effectively, he says, too many universities are still relying on email as their primary channel to engage prospective students. The problem is simple. Students no longer wait days for a response. If another institution replies faster, they win the conversation, and often the student. Young people communicate in real time. They expect clarity, speed, and a human tone. When a university cannot meet this expectation, it signals misalignment. And he goes on to talk about some of the messaging tools that are now the de facto way students around the world communicate, and identifying what those tools are in key markets, as Sonormis has done successfully for a number of years, is key in terms of meeting students where they are. And that's always something that I've preached from my days at Education USA, even before that. One of the core marketing principles I live by is live where your audiences live. And whether that's your domestic student audiences, obviously having a physical presence where they are, that you're going to meet them directly. Internationally, obviously that's not as easy. You have to cover the entire globe. What does that look like? And having a presence where they are means living on the platforms that they're using. And digitally, we know students live on their phone, we know they're on their messaging apps, and that's the way they communicate. And that's how we should be communicating with them. But some of us don't even bother capturing those kind of messaging app IDs in our CRMs so that we can easily facilitate that communication. Some of us can't even do simple things like create usernames or create numbers that we can attach then to devices or to particular messaging accounts for an office, and have to use our personal accounts in order to communicate with prospective students. There's some real functional challenges here. But Nick really encapsulates a lot of why we need to use these tools as we reach out to prospective students and make sure that we're living where they live. A couple other important pieces just on the overall need to innovate. The last one is an article that came out from the Pi News last week entitled Paranoia and Preemptive Action, a Difficult Outlook for the United States. And the lead of the article is the Pi's Nicholas Cuthbert reports on an increasingly dystopian atmosphere in the U.S. where government influence and perceived threat is fueling preemptive curbs on international student recruitment and tangible fear among higher education professionals that things will get worse before they get better. So he's coming off the back of their own Pi Live event in Chicago, what's happening in Canada, and the complete train wreck that international education has become there because of changes in government policy. You've had the calls to call to arms from Miriam Feldblum from the President's Alliance that we talked about last week. The U.S. for Success would, in terms of to help fuel the litigation, the U.S. for Success Coalition, in terms of representing our interests, is a costly endeavor. We know that when the SEVIS terminations were happening, there were individual students that filed lawsuits against the government for illegal actions by terminating their statuses in SEVIS for no cause. We found several legal cases to freedom of speech for social media posts and that type of thing get challenged successfully in court. And now those legal battles do not come for free, but they do require some funds to pay for the lawyers to go argue with those cases. Then that requires money, either donors or war chests from these organizations, these associations, many of which are piecemeal association memberships. like the U.S. for Success Coalition. That's an organization made up of membership of key associations. So it's really a very diffused organizational structure, so that doesn't have a budget really. So how are they going to pay? Who's going to pay for these lawsuits? So these are the things that really need to be sorted in order to those fights to happen. So that's on a national scale in terms of what needs to happen. Is there needs to be legal challenges to some of the things that have been done, and most all executive orders and new actions that have been proposed by the Trump administration have been litigated, but for all intents and purposes, the travel bans are not ones that we can do anything about right now. When that goes into effect January 1st, it will be the law of the land until it gets challenged in court and overturned, or situations change where countries that are on that list suddenly meet the security requirements that the U.S. government, Department of Homeland Security, Department of State have put in place. That's why they've gotten on these lists, because of visa overstay rates, because of those countries not sharing criminal database information for visa applicants from those countries. That's why those countries get on these lists. And a lot of these countries, the governments aren't the most stable and certainly aren't the most U.S. friendly, so they aren't willing to share. So they get on these bad lists, the naughty list, so to speak. And I don't know, the naughty list of countries for this administration just keeps growing. So there are considerable numbers on that list. But the need to not stand still, to innovate, and to make the changes internally in terms of how we message, where we go, T&E opportunities we might explore, so that we're not sitting still. And what I will say is where we recruit now has to change. And this was a comment I made to colleagues at IRC. I made it at ISEF. I've been saying it for a couple months now, is that, hey, our new recruitment strategy should follow where we have trade deals with other countries. We know in Malaysia, in Vietnam, in Japan, in Korea, we've had trade deals done, and Indonesia. We've seen success, and we're seeing interest grow. We're seeing visa appointments available. We're seeing students get visas from those countries. So why don't we? It's very counterintuitive, maybe from a traditional recruitment perspective, but does that need to be our new way of operating on a short-term scale? Yes, you want to build bridges globally, but where are you going to have, what's the path of least resistance at this point? And the path of least resistance will be in those countries where we already have trade deals. Next level will be those countries that aren't on the list of countries where there are travel restrictions. After that, it might be some other markets that you have alumni base in, that you already have potential partner universities that you could potentially explore T&E opportunities with. So these are the things that we need to be looking at, and not let paranoia grip us. And it can be a very all-consuming thing. And fear, and my colleague Lorena Polovina from in uni, who I spent some time with at ISIF last week, made it very clear in her recent article about fear and how we can't let fear guide our actions. We have to pocket away that fear and move forward and be bold and be brave and take those chances that need to be taken in order to open up opportunities for our institution, to expand into areas that we haven't thought about before, to take a chance in a country where if there's potentially a small niche that you could be developing a market there and for a particular program. We're looking at some things at the University of Akron now that are going to expand some of our healthcare programs in particular markets where there's a crying need for it. It might be one or two programs, but we could expand in the 2 or 3 countries with these with our existing healthcare programs, human health and human science college degrees that would have great value in certain markets, but that wouldn't be a traditional opportunity you would think would be high on our list. But times have changed. We need to change with them. If we don't, we get left behind. That's most important. So let's move on to our second question of the day, and that is, will the travel bans be extended? And we got the answer to this late yesterday with the announcements of. There was an article last week from the PI saying that this is coming. Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem had said there's going to be up to 30 new countries added to the complete travel ban list. And what we've got as of yesterday, and NAFSA has also produced kind of a breakdown chart of what those new bans involve. And that's something we all need to be updating. Our ISSS folks have already done their due diligence. We've already assessed who's on the new list that we need to worry about. That may be from both our current students who are no longer going to be able to travel home and come back without significant risk, and those that are incoming in the spring. If they don't have their visas before January 1st, they're going to be out of luck and not able to get in. Maybe some of these countries that are on their list change their policies, and one would hope a country like Nigeria, that is the largest sender on the list of students coming to the United States on these list that have been added. We need to be aware of that, and that's something that we see as a real challenge. We are having to communicate those changes as we get the details. So what's happened? What are the new bans? As you might recall, there were 19 countries on the initial bans that were released in June. There was a group of 12 original countries that had a full ban, which meant entry is suspended for immigrants and all non-immigrant visa categories. That included Afghanistan, Burma, Chad, Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. From that list, certainly Iran was the largest single sender. I've already shared we have 20 students from Iran that they obviously weren't coming. Most of them weren't coming. Well, actually, they were. They were previously been coming direct from Iran, but a couple of them were diaspora Iranians. But they can't go home because they won't get back because they can't go home to Iran, obviously, and certainly if they did, they wouldn't be able to get back into the country. But from that list of 12, all of them are continuing in this new configuration. It is a movable feast, a changeable list. We saw back in June there was a list of the original 12 full bans, and then 7 that were on partial bans. We'll talk about that category next. And then there was another list of 30-odd countries that were on the proposed ban list, 36, I think, countries. And that included countries like Ghana and Nigeria that were on that proposed list back in June that were subject to potential inclusion in the bans. We saw in the interim, after that initial list of 36 potential future ban countries, we saw a couple of them, Ghana in particular, get removed from that ban list because their country made the changes that we asked for in terms of sharing of data for applicants for visas. Ghana agreed to share their data with us on their criminal databases so that we could run checks against their databases for any applicants for visas to the U.S. Hopefully, some of these other countries that have just gotten added are going to be included in that. The full ban list now includes 8 more countries that were on the temporary ban. That would be Burkina Faso, Laos, Mali, Niger, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, and Syria. Any of those individuals who seek to travel on documents issued by the Palestinian Authority. So refugees from Palestine are no longer going to be accepted. So those 8 additional countries are now part of 20 that are full ban, no immigrants or non-immigrants allowed. Then there is a group now of 20 other countries. There were 7 on the original list: Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela were on the partial ban list, where entry is suspended for immigrants and B1, B2, F, M, and J visas. From that list of 7, Turkmenistan was removed from that list for the non-immigrant visa categories. So B's, F's, M, and J's are allowed now from Turkmenistan. So that might be a potential recruitment opportunity. But you see added, of that 7, Burundi, Cuba, Togo, and Venezuela remain on the list. Laos moved up to the full ban list. Sierra Leone was moved to the full ban list. Turkmenistan was removed from that list. So of that 4 of that 7 will continue: Burundi, Cuba, Togo, and Venezuela. But 15 were added to that list. And that is where the real impact is being felt. Outside of Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, and Tonga, outside of those 3, the other 12 are all African countries. So we now have 12 new African countries plus Togo and Burundi. So those are now 14 countries that are on the partial ban list from Africa, where no international students are possible or non-immigrant visas are possible. And then you had, those, what did we say? We said 12 plus 2, that's 14. And now we have on the permanent ban list 14 plus Burkina Faso, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 27 countries in Africa. It is now impossible for international students to come to the United States. 27 African countries. That's half the continent. There's about 55 countries in Africa. Half of Africa is no longer on the recruitment table for U.S. institutions, including, as we mentioned last time, Nigeria, Senegal, as some of the most common populous countries, Cote d'Ivoire as well, that are no longer able to come to the United States. So African recruitment just got very narrow. Zimbabwe's off the list. Zambia's off the list. Senegal's off the list. Tanzania's off the list. Nigeria's off the list. Gabon, Gambia, Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, Senegal, off the list. Sierra Leone, off the list. Togo, off the list. You can't recruit there anymore, unless those students from those countries are already in the United States. So, and that is a market. We know we have some transfer-ins for the spring term from community colleges from those countries, and we're telling them obviously don't go home. So half the African continent is now off limits. You can't recruit there. What are you going to do? You now have if you're going to look at those countries as potential markets, you got to look at those that are already in the United States, because they can't come to us from their home countries anymore. So will the travel bans continue? Yes, they will. And that's something that we really need to focus on. They've been extended. But again, we know that those aren't permanent lists. So if those countries realize, oh shoot, we really need to keep our pipeline of students going to the U.S. open, the governments are going to need to change their policies and share their data and share their criminal data when they have applicants that are going to be applying to us for visas. So that's the only way that those lists will change. And it did change in the proposed list. We know Ghana got off the list. Turkmenistan has made moves to get off the list. So there are ways that these things can change to allow for students to still come. So that's the only, a lot of this obviously is out of our control because this is other countries' governments and their ability to share. And that the focus on national security, particularly for visas for students and anyone coming into the United States, because that's such a high priority for this government, we have to go with the flow on that. We don't have to like it, but we have to advocate for our students, and we will, and hopefully there will be legal cases that will be challenged and hopefully make a difference in the months to come. So let's move on to our final question of the day, which is more of a theoretical one exercise here in terms of looking at Canada and Australia's transnational education efforts. We've seen just this past week there have been two articles from about Australia and one on Canada in terms of how they are viewing their relative TNE opportunities. The one from Canada kind of takes a risk and a reward approach to overseas campuses that's looking at the different institutions that have those overseas, that the challenges are really retaining faculty, finding students who can afford to go overseas, even for one semester of their own students, and that it's a gamble financially for institutions that can reap strong reputational, educational, financial benefits, but it also can leave them with, particularly those that locations in high cost of living countries like the UK, many European nations. Those have higher costs, and the upkeep on those campuses is quite significant, and harder to sustain. So for Canada, it seems to be more of a negative approach, or not a very positive approach to TNE. Whereas in Australia, we've got the news of the University of New South Wales, founding member of the Group of Eight, becoming the third Australian university to open. And they are going to be opening in Bengaluru in the next year or so. There are also the highest ranking in the global ranking scale, highest ranking university to get a place in Indian as a TNE location campus in Australia. You also see Charles Sturt University becoming the first ever that university's first international campus in Sri Lanka. And the interesting dynamics there in Sri Lanka are there are 160,000 students are university ready every year, but there are just not enough places for them in the public universities. There are limited spaces. So typically 60,000 Sri Lankan students pursue TNE opportunities every year just because they can't get into the 20 public universities available in that country. So Charles Sturt is making inroads there into Sri Lanka with its own campus, and that certainly is meeting a need in that country. So, and that is ultimately where I think a lot of colleges that are trying to look at the TNE opportunities that might be out there for them have to look at it with a very serious and focused eye in terms of what you can potentially do. Is everybody going to be open a full branch campus where they have the facilities and have the funding from the government, to whether it's the local government or your home government, to build an actual campus and run all the classes and hire all the faculty and have all that overhead? No, most colleges don't have that, certainly not in the US. There are a few that have had the certainly the endowments and funding opportunities to pursue those, but it's a very limited number. Though we may have TNE locations, and it seems like there are over 50 around the world that have U.S. campuses that have U.S. campuses abroad, but for Australia, they are much more focused and certainly have much greater backing from the government to help make their TNE plans actually happen. So very different process or approach to TNE. Canada's tends to be more like the US's in terms of bricks and mortar campuses, whereas and the significant expense involved in those and the setup for those, whereas Australia, UK tend to be taking very different tacks than we have, certainly. But we're looking at different things. You have to innovate again. It all goes back to that. Is this the time to sit back and do what you've always done? Because that's not working. And the rules have changed, and we need to change. We can challenge the rules that we disagree with in the courts, and that takes time. It doesn't change the fact that right now we are being forced to change the way we do things, both by external pressures from our governments, internal pressures from our institutions that are running over a domestic cliff this year and need other resources, sources of student revenue, and are looking at international as a solution to that, and leaning into that as institutions where you have that issue. And also fundamentally changing because of the way students obtain their information and prefer to communicate. We need to change. We need to innovate. It's no longer optional. So that's all we have for you this week on the Roundup. Well, we look forward to chatting with you again next week. And until then, have a wonderful